where does funny come from? And so there's a whole bunch of different philosophies. This one that's called benign violation.
Benign violation?
Benign violation.
That doesn't sound right.
It's got the word benign in it.
Yeah,
It's
that's
okay.
why they added the benign.
Right.
Okay.
So all comedy comes from some sort of expectation, some sort of contract that you have with another person that you break. Right. So you set them up. Right. It's a Mitch Hedberg joke of, I just got my hair highlighted. Everybody in the room knows exactly what that phrase means. And then he does a quick switch and breaks that contract and puts a different meaning on that, because then he says, because I thought some strands were more important than others. Right. So it takes that thing that everybody knows what it is, and then you get this expectation switch of what it really meant in that moment.
He's a scientist, knows a lot about the brain and pretty much everything. Co-owner of the Idiot Box. I mean, he teaches stand-up classes, workshops, I guess is probably the term he'd use. But, he's kind of got a lot of comedy stuff down to a science, too.
Really?
Yeah. Which, I mean, there are different schools of thought, but the way he approaches it with that kind of science-y mind.
Really?
So, yeah. You can ask him about that.
I do, too, and more of a garage inventor, like a crazy garage inventor.
A meth lab.
Yeah, instead of having like a basement where I'm building like ideas that are crazy. I have a notebook.
Yeah. You're a meth lab scientist.
That's right. I'm a meth lab scientist.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's still a lab. Still got a coat.
A mad scientist, right?
Yeah. You're putting body parts together. Dr. Frankenstein.
I'm a mad lib scientist. I was thinking more along Marcus Aurelius' in Meditations, like how little we mean in the grand scheme of this and the universe and all that.
But I don't know if he means it like that. I think we attach meaning to things, which is awesome. I love the fact that I get to attach meaning to stuff. People are like, ugh, we just attach it. It's a chemical thing. And our brain's like, yeah, pretty cool that I get to pick what it is, right?
I'm reading about, in this book I'm reading about the near-death experiences. I'm just getting to this part where they're pointing out the difference between mind and brain.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good question for Steve.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Mind over brain, brain over mind.
It's not a good question for you. It's not a good question like, hey, what do you think of mind over brain?
What do you mean it's not a good question for
me?
you
just instantly
I'm just goofing.
That's a good question for this other guy.
I'm just goofing.
Yeah.
Brain and mind? What are we talking, like the mind is tethered to the brain? Like the mind is... The brain
is the mind separate from
conduit.
Is the mind separate from the brain?
Yeah.
They are separate, right?
Yeah, because your brain is like, hey, we got to go piss. Why would your mind thinks more abstract conceptually about things. I don't think it doesn't, I mean, the brain is the communication way to the mind. So it's like, okay, the brain tells all the mushy stuff what it needs to do, like breathe and piss and make oxygen and whatever. And the mind is like, what do I want to be when I grow up?
Does the brain create the mind, or is the mind, you know what I'm saying?
I guess the brain can control the mind. Like if you have a chemical imbalance or something that makes you depressed or makes you want to steal things or whatever, I guess it can, But I think we're kind of more than our actions, a little bit. The guy, we're more than our actions, I think.
I'm not sure I still understand what the difference between mind and brain is, to be honest.
It is hard.
It's a good question for a scientist. I'm glad we have one coming in.
Yeah.
So we were talking about, before we get personal on my side, because I don't want that to happen, we're going to get right to the quick phrase for you is part owner of the Idiot Box and a scientist. So you're like a scientist and a comedian and an improv person, master, some may say.
Yeah.
You think some would say that, master?
Some would say that.
Okay.
I've been doing it long enough where it would be embarrassing.
I love that you're just like, you're confident, like, yes, sir, I am. I'm just making up, like you don't have imposter syndrome like the rest of us. You're just like, yeah, good.
It's got a yes and, too.
Yeah. I mean, if I was describing myself, I would never use that word. But if somebody else wanted to label me, I'd be like, all right, I'm not going to I'm not. I learned that like I'm a bigger asshole when I try to not take a compliment. So I just.
What are you best at?
What am I best at?
Yeah.
In life or in comedy?
Well, comedy, improv, or scientist. And if you can't make how much money you make doesn't have anything to do with.
Oh no, yeah, no, I wouldn't. I actually don't think I can separate those.
Really?
Yeah. So they're all about making connections, and that's like one of the things I do, whether it's problem solving or writing a joke.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a great answer.
That is a great answer.
That was a really good, yeah.
So can you teach to be a scientific mind to write, or a non-scientific mind to write scientifically, like in their writing for comedy? Or
Yeah, so
I don't know if that question makes sense.
No, it does. I teach stand-up as a class, and the prerequisite for the class is that you have to have laughed at some point. Because if you can laugh at something, then you can say, I think there's something funny in there.
Are there people that haven't laughed at things?
Well, my point is that anybody can take the class.
Oh.
I like how it was a welcoming little phrase, and you're like, has there people?
Like, who are those people?
Yeah.
Who are the non-laughter people? But just like you can't, some people you can't teach to have a scientific mind, you can't teach them to do comedy, right?
Well, I think you can, I think anything is learnable. I think people have aptitude for one thing over another. And I'm not saying that everybody should be a stand-up comic and that the people that I'm teaching are going to get Netflix specials because I'm teaching them so awesomely.
Right.
But I think every single person can generate jokes. And I also think that you can generate a joke that's in joke structure without it being funny. And you can write.
I do that a lot.
Everybody does. You write 100 of those, and like accidentally, those new students are going to find, oh, these are better than others, and you can start to kind of discern where.
That's where the science and the math comes in, right? Because you write 100, of course, there's going to be, worst case scenario, probably there's going to be 5 that are usable.
Correct.
Right. So then it just becomes on numbers game of keep writing.
Yeah, and the science part for me is like doing a little bit of analysis, which I am also lazy, so I will often not go back and do this. Right,
I am too.
Like I am a very good liar when it comes to me. I will lie to myself and say, I don't need to do that when I write comedy. I can just spew it out of my face and it will be awesome. But I know I do know what my best method is, and that's the ideation comes whenever, right?
But isn't that improv? Just spewing out of your mouth whatever comes to you?
No.
Am I underestimating improv?
Yeah.
I'm shitting on improv.
No, that's not shitting on improv. That's actually a gift I think that few people actually have. Like I think like Eric is a much better comic of just spitballing and stuff coming out of his face in the right
emotion. It's
in
so
the right
grounded
structure.
in emotion.
Yeah,
and the connection that he makes with feelings and feelings of the audience at the same time.
And yet it's still in stand-up structure, right? Because like anybody can have words come out of their face. Improv has a different set of skills that while the laugh is still maybe an end product, it's not generated by the same like mechanisms that stand-up is. It ends up with like you get laughs in improv when there's recognition, when something suddenly snaps into like making sense, or you kind of have this mismatch of ideas and somehow that still progresses into one. And it's the quickness and the wit, but everybody in the room knows that it's coming off the top of your head. If you were to record that, memorize those words, and then repeat that as a sketch, it doesn't have the same impact.
It's funny you say that. That's one of my, like improv versus stand-up, sort of that fake little thing we have with each other. I like to be like, well, there's no improv albums that people are listening to.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think it's like, to me, it's almost like capturing. I don't know improv, which is funny because I think I have March off because I'm just taking it off to be around to watch my son's last season of baseball and do this. I'm for the first time ever going to be like, I want to go take an improv class. Why
should.
have I never tried to sharpen this
Come
tool,
tonight,
whatever
Tom.
it is? Huh?
Come tonight. I'm going.
To the improv class?
Yeah.
Well, I want to take it start to finish or whatever, like in March.
You only missed the beginning.
Huh?
You only missed the beginning.
Well, that's where they tell you the most important part, to say yes and,
I
right?
think Jenny just had us do like some warm-up exercises and introduction.
Maybe I will.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll be teaching tonight.
Yeah.
Oh, sweet.
Why? They just teach me
Oh,
now.
yeah, 'cause
Let's
Jen's
cut to
out
the
of
chase.
town.
Have you read a lot? What do you find easier to teach or more gratifying to teach? Stand up or improv?
The gratification isn't in the subject; it's in the
Student.
progress.
Mm.
Yeah.
The student and the teacher together create the teaching.
Yes. He's been sitting on that for a while.
I can't even believe I remembered it.
that sounds like both a fortune cookie and genius.
Yeah.
In bed, you just throw that in there. Yeah. So like the thing I love about teaching is, for the stand-up class, you get to see them in the show, and I tell the class every at the beginning of the class, you're going to have a show, and these are my favorite shows to do, and I'm sincere in that because
you guys all look so bad that I look like a fucking star.
No,
right?
they look amazing. They bring
Yeah,
it, and they do the, and yeah, it's the audience is filled with their friends and family, so that it's a more than average audience from a generosity perspective.
Who would you rather kill in front of
What?
than your friends and family? Like
Yeah.
the first time you do comedy, like to kill in front of your friends and family would be that. Who do you care about more?
Yeah.
Right? So that happens continuously on the graduation nights. It's like these nights where, and then they go to a real, that's not a real show because it is, but then they go to a regular night, same act, and it's like, what happened?
Yeah, but they go with a different level of confidence. So even in the what happened, they're armed with knowing that it's going to happen sometimes, that they're going to bomb, and they're going to have to figure out why they bombed so that they don't do that again.
Right.
But they also go with some confidence and some feedback around what will work.
And they have this sense of relief of, thank God my friends and family didn't come to this episode.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You get that show two. Show one is I'm the greatest in front of everybody I love. And the second show is thank God nobody saw that. Right? That's the great introduction to stand-up, because it's a constant swing
Up
of
and
like,
down.
I'm the greatest. Holy shit, am
shit.
I terrible? Like, what am I doing? Like,
Yeah.
I should have a special. Oh my God, that's awful. Yes.
I should watch a special.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. I can't even spell comedy. All right. And the improv, that doesn't happen. When people come out to see the improv sort of graduation, there's not a
Oh, it's the same feeling, right? For the most part, I don't teach the full class anymore in improv. That's all.
You're like a
Jenny.
headliner that just does Friday, Saturday.
I'll
You're like, somebody
I'll fill in for when Jenny's absent, but we had kind of like this division of labor because the stand-up teaching tended to be me, but I'll dip in and teach a class here or there. But
she's amazing, by the way.
She is.
Yeah,
You're gonna get no argument from me. On
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, she's
No
amazing,
pushback.
right? And yeah, that's great that you don't get any argument. You don't get the normal husband like, well, you don't know her, like, you know what I mean? But you're like even more so. But the way she, same kind of thing. The way she connects, the way she does it, her level of total like comfort on stage. Although I'm sure she's like all of us, and she doesn't have all that, and she has some kick in herself, but. She's just a wonderful person to watch do this crap. Do stand up and do improv.
I agree. She gets away with things because they're coming from a good place.
Yeah.
Far more than she'll say, I got a new idea for a joke, and I'll be like,
yeah, you're no slouch either, dude. Yeah, you write like kind of like classic sort of like here's a topic, and I have dissected this motherfucker. Like if you're going to the gym, you're like, there's 5 minutes of gym stuff. Bam, ba, bam, 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 joke, you know?
Yeah, that actually came to like haunt me at a place. I was trying to get past at a place. And so I won't name the place because it might get out. But the guy said, I'll give you a call I'll call you on Tuesday and we'll talk. And the call started with like, dude, you're really funny. And I was like, sweet, this worked out well. And he's like, but you only told one joke. I was like, what do you mean I only told one joke? And like, that was the time where I was like really nerdy analytical around my stuff. I would record my sets and I would do laughs per minute. And if the laughs per minute wasn't up there, I'd be like, all right, what can I do? How can I tinker with the words? And so that set that I did was like the tightest set I had, with an average of like a reaction, not always like a huge gut, that the belly busting laugh.
Right.
But there was a reaction every 7.5 seconds and it's the best. It's still the most laughs per minute that I got.
Right.
And
that bugs me too. It's like, what do you mean? There was literally 23 jokes there. Every sentence was a joke. It's like people listening to an Eminem song and going like, he rhymed chimes with mimes. Like, no, he rhymed every syllable on the way to that over and over and over. Like, and that's all you got? How are you?
Yeah, and so in talking to him a little bit more, he was an old school comic, and he was ready for set up punch, and just keep on going. He's like, what if they don't like that joke? I was like, what do you mean if they don't like that joke?
Then there's another one 8 seconds later.
That's exactly what I said.
There could be like, I don't like this guy talking. The gym, I'm out.
I can't
relate.
And then he's like, what happens with that? Then I go to another bit. I don't understand what you're talking about. Right. But it was an old school comic that confused the concept of a joke with a bit or a chunk.
It seems odd that somebody in comedy that long would make that mistake. You'd think like a newer comic would be like, what do you mean? There was only, you just did the thing about.
I'm with you. And so I ended up saying, do you want me to come back? I'll just do jokes. I'll just do sit up punch, And so I did go back, and then I failed for a different reason that day.
Right. What was this reason?
That one, so the first show, the host was hadn't done comedy in like 22 years, and the owner was throwing him a solid and said, "Why don't you come and host?" And he was an impressionist, and he was really good at impressions.
From 22 years ago.
Right.
And he wasn't doing the modern ones 22 years ago. You know what I mean? He was doing he was doing Jimmy Stewart. And like,
and they were very good, and I was very impressed.
He did I'll Be Back,
but there was no jokes. It was just the impressions. So imagine a comic getting up there and doing impressions of Jimmy Stewart, just doing Jimmy Stewart lines.
Yes.
I'm like, other than the recognition,
didn't even like change the lines that they said.
Not in this case.
What if Arnold Schwarzenegger was trying to get into a helicopter after shooting a bunch of people?
In like every movie.
And he just acts out the exact scene, and everybody's like, oh my God.
That's it.
Then he's like, you can't handle the truth. He just does the scene. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Yes. And that guy's like, see, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And so the room was silent in the end.
Oh, good. Good.
And so, but I got on after and killed, and I had a great set. And so the second time I went back out there, the host, I get to the green room, and the host is like, do you have a twin? And I was like, do I have a twin? He's like, well, I found, because he looked me up, right? And he's like, oh, this guy, Steve Lesser, is going to be here. So he looked me up, and he's like, there's like, not a comedian, but there's like a PhD guy out there. And he looks like looks just like you. So I was like, do you think I have a twin and that my parents also named him Steve Lesser?
Right. That's just funny.
That's such a weird thing.
Oh, that is a weird thing.
But he's like, oh, of course not. Right. But
because you don't associate comedian with PhD.
Exactly.
That doesn't happen.
I don't blame him at all.
Especially for a non-writer that can't make connections. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So he was so enthralled with the PhD. We were for like 30 minutes. We were talking about my dissertation.
What was your dissertation?
It was I studied a class of proteins called neurotrophic factors, and studied how they could change the electrical property of neurons.
Okay.
And so it's basic research, but it has like a potential impact for like explaining kind of like the feed forward process that happens during epilepsy. So if you have a seizure, It turns out that some of those neurotrophic factors get upregulated, some get downregulated. So, but it was really studying it for
Are you
understanding.
Are you a brain scientist?
Neurobiologist.
I don't know what that means, but
Brain scientist.
Okay, so I hate to get off like about your the stories about you trying to get MC work or whatever, you know what I'm saying? But
Well, let him finish the story.
Okay, get back to that. But I'm interested in this too because we
Okay.
were earlier talking about the difference between mind and brain. Anyway.
Well, I won't have an answer for that.
Okay.
I would just say, good question. Yeah. So the host was so intrigued, and like
I am too. That's what's making me interrupt.
very sincerely, like, and we talked about lots of stuff. And when he introduced me, it was like a 3-minute introduction that summarized my thesis, and I was like, oh my God, I've never come out to here's a scientist.
Yeah. How'd that work?
Well, so in the moment, I was like, all right, I'm going to ditch this part of the set. And I have this, a part that's like me having a PhD versus an MD. So I was like, I think I got to acknowledge this now to the crowd. And so in that, I wasn't as prepared to do that. Came out a little flat.
But it forced you to be in the moment.
It did force me to be in the moment. And I always like when I modify my plan in the moment and it works. But this modification was like, okay, maybe not for a Las Vegas crowd.
Oh, in Vegas.
Yeah.
It turned into tell us something smart, funny
Yeah.
man.
Well, yeah, the thing about Vegas, I found, like, it's such an interesting thing. Like Vegas, there's places like that where you're like, oh, this is like Vegas. It clicks in your head when you're doing. There's something about, especially those when there's all this shared experience of people from everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. I've found over the years, if you do something about Vegas, then you can literally do anything that you've done. But if you just open with, I have a PhD, blah, 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 then it's like, they don't care. But if you open with like, hey, the slot machines are crazy, right? Blah, blah, blah. And you do some quick joke about slot machines, like we all just saw this. And in a place like Vegas, it's almost unparalleled with how you have to do that in my experience.
The other thing that struck me too, and not that I have a lot of experience there, but the people in the front have a different, like, a different life than the people in the back of the room. The people in the front tend to be the people that, were comped and like are just big gamblers, and they could,
and their
sometimes
first look at you is, who the fuck
they could
is
sometimes
this guy?
give a shit about stand up. They're just there because it's a free show that they got because they gambled enough. And then the people you want to laugh are everybody else. I had
It's a strange energy.
It is a strange energy. So I mean, it's a little bit of me, taking a small sample size and kind of like theorizing on it.
Right.
But I had seen George Carlin in Atlantic City. My dad was awesome in like supporting when I like, he's like, hey, is this the guy you like?
Oh yeah.
I was like, yeah. And so he took me out of school early on a Friday. We drove down to Atlantic City from Syracuse, New York, and we went to resorts.
Oh,
And we saw George Carlin, and he was in this phase where
How old were you?
I was in high school, but I can't remember which year. So I was probably, but I probably was like 17.
That's a good, yeah.
Because I had been into Carlin for years before that, and far earlier than I probably should have.
Well, you're a scientist. You have that mind that he thought differently that made you go, huh?
Exactly.
Like, or wow, that guy's talking about it, like something about the level of smart that he's doing.
Super genius of just being able to spot that one way of just shining a light on it, so that thing that was always in front of you, that you've seen or you've said and you've uttered that phrase a million times,
Right.
and it's not what it is, right? You shine a light on it and look at it in a slightly different way. My example is, everybody says, hey, you threw up, but like the George Carlin bit on that is like so obvious of like, you don't throw up. If anything, you throw out.
Yes.
If you threw up, you'd have to move out of the way.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like you're not getting on the plane, you're getting in the plane. Like this simple language stuff that
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the more common that is, the more it hits you in the face when it's like, oh my God, he's totally right.
Yeah.
And so
I love that too, like, because it's wordplay, and I'm a big, like, somehow I felt like that's comedy writing wise. That's like, that's the door to me a lot. Like the hearing a word or a phrase or being like, oh, that's
it often,
it has a beat to it, that I recognize, or the flip of double entendres and
Yep.
That's what probably one of the reasons I like Eminem too, the way he uses language.
Yeah.
We were saying last night something about massacre. It was a Sunday, and I was like, it's a massacre at the
A massacre.
A massacre at the massacre. A massacre occurred at the some version.
That's a fun one to mumble to yourself walking down the street by yourself. That's a great one. That's a good look. Tom's leaving that part out of the story.
You're on a list, is what we're saying.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I picked up a fucking ban from Facebook, like for a thing from 2020 or something, that they're like, there's no arguing it anymore.
Yeah.
They're just like, you can't do this, you can't, whatever, that's fine. I don't.
What did you say?
Well, it was just it was a joke about, it wasn't even a joke. It was more like something happened in the news, obviously, but it was, let me get this straight. A guy reaches for his wallet and the police shoot him 17 times. But a guy was walking with his hand on a trigger of an AR-15 and you guys talk him out of it. Mm. Hey, start shooting these dudes and shoot them and leave the guys with the wallets alone. And it was,
there's where they got it.
Yeah, but they weren't mad at it then. They're just like, they're going back in time to be like, you can't say that 3 years ago that we let you say it.
They're retconning Tom. You can't do this.
It's fine. Fuck, it's one of the, hopefully that because they'll start doing that. If it's based on memories, they're going to have a lot of, I'm going to be gone and it's fine. They're helping me, So were you always, so you've always, since Carlin, so before you even went to college to start being a scientist, you were sort of.
Yeah, and like when I was like 5, my parents' friends would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I'd say, I want to be a comic.
Wow.
Oh, comedian.
Right.
And I mean, I only knew like Rich Little and Bob Hope and, and I'm not even sure I knew the difference between the joke tellers and like Carol Burnett or Lucille Ball, like
just fun.
Anybody that, I was like, I want to make people laugh.
So what's the science behind making people laugh? Like, have you ever looked into what's the brain science that makes somebody laugh? Because it obviously is because of a connection that happens.
Yeah. So I don't actually know like the like where in the brain or that kind of thing, but I have thought quite a bit about like where does funny come from? So and I didn't do any of my research on that other than look at what philosophers over the years have always said, where does funny come from? And so there's a whole bunch of different philosophies. The one that I think that I agree with most is this one that's called benign violation.
Benign violation?
Benign violation.
That doesn't sound right.
It's got the word benign in it.
Yeah,
it's
that's
okay.
why they added the benign.
Right.
Okay.
So all comedy comes from some sort of expectation, some sort of contract that you have with another person that you break. Right. So you set them up, right? It's a Mitch Hedberg joke of, I just got my hair highlighted. Everybody in the room knows exactly what that phrase means. And then he does a quick switch and breaks that contract and puts a different meaning on that. Because then he says, because I thought some strands were more important than others. Right. So it takes that thing that everybody knows what it is. And then you get this expectation switch of what it really meant in that moment.
I had a thing in mind, like for him, it's like you feel like he points out something, like you're saying that thing Carlin points out and is like, that's different. I was thinking that when you were saying it, Hedberg had it in like, it felt like you'd thought that before.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it had that kind of feeling, like an escalator's never broken, it's just temporary stairs. It's like,
yeah,
I've felt that before. I've said like, and you hadn't spoken it to life, but you
knew it.
Yes.
And I think those are the best kind of simple truth kind of jokes where it's that thing that you kind of inherently know but never labeled, because then it hits you harder. Like if it doesn't connect in that way, you can still get a laugh, but those are the ones where you get those like really just like and you'll think about it. It will change your life sometimes.
Yes,
These
I was
jokes.
talking, what was I talking to you about that? About with my son, there's been a couple jokes that I've heard over or in life that have then from comics that have become part of how I parented. You know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I remember like Hicks's thing about the guy on acid jumping off a 7-story building because he thought he could fly, and
Oh yeah.
so his rule is, hey, if anytime you want to fly, you should take off from the ground first. And so when Owen would talk about how he could fly or whatever, or I'd remind him over and over, like, what do we do when we fly? What's the first step? We take off from the ground first.
Yeah. I think it just goes to show how like the role comedians play, because they're thinkers, right? And they have a point of view, and even something that seems like a silly joke can have that thought behind it and change a life.
Yeah.
And
Tom changed a life.
Jimmy Dore changed a life.
Well, this is your joke. So.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I was telling this the other day. There are jokes that I saw Steve Martin live in 1978.
Wow. So
that's a few years ago, right? That's 44 years ago.
Yeah.
Plus or minus a half a year, whatever. And I remember.
I'm just saying, it could be 20 years, and I'm just like, yeah. You're doing the math.
I'll trust your math. It's going to be really embarrassing if I got that wrong. Welcome to the comments section.
Seth will make like a good like video of screen of like the numbers and how show that you're wrong.
And there's two jokes that that still stick with me today that I remember in that instance. You know what kind of impact you have to have with a joke to have it last for 44 years in somebody's head? That's pretty impressive.
That is. What was the joke?
The first one, you know how he used to kind of, the whole persona of like, you're lucky to be seeing me.
Oh yeah,
right?
I can't believe how lucky you guys. The worst part about this show is I can't sit out there and watch it.
Exactly. and like he had this, kind of this running thing of doing various magic tricks that may or may not actually at all be magic at all, right? And there's one of those that it's important to know also that this is in front of like, I don't know, 15, 20,000 people. I don't know. It was at the New York State Fair, and he was doing a card trick. So he had a deck of cards, and presumably I was so far away that I couldn't see what card it was, but presumably the King of Hearts was like sticking out of the deck. And he played with the audience. He was trying to get the audience to say, King of Hearts, come down and dance. And eventually the audience did it well enough, and he just goes, and it's just silly, right?
Right. That stuck with you for 40 years.
Yeah, but here's what really stuck with me, because even though I was 8, he committed to that bit. So the audience laughed, and then there was like this die down of the laughter, and then he kept on. He did not like, it wasn't like it ramped down. He committed to that bit and I don't know how long it actually went, but the audience laugh went down, and then laughed at the just ridiculousness that this guy was in that persona of, you're lucky to be seeing this. This trick is why you came to see me. Yeah, and he's just and it was just so fun. And then the other one that I remember was
so do you do that when you do you translate that tool to your comedy when you're performing, like maybe subconsciously, where like, if I'm making a noise, do the noise through the point where they're laughing, and then keep going, and then they'll laugh again. I was actually thinking of a joke I used to do that in.
Is that like called like crossing the line twice or something like that?
I don't even know. I've never heard it described.
Sometimes I'll refer to it as like a double down, but that can also refer to other things.
Right.
But I did a section of my set in Spanish a little while ago. Again, being analytical, I've had this hypothesis that language super important, obviously, in communicating like the meaning of the joke, but I actually think you can generate laughs, and something that you like, a bit that really well, that you perform, not just narrate, that you perform. I think you can generate laughs in that, and I've been saying that for a while. So I always wanted to do like translate a bit like that to like Swedish or something that I don't even know and the audience won't know, And I had an opportunity to do it, but I didn't have the time to learn Swedish sounds at all. So I was just like, all right, I'll do a shortcut and do Spanish. So I did it in Spanish, and I got laughs. So though it wasn't a good experiment because there's people in there that spoke Spanish.
Oh, and they got the joke.
Well, there was things like soy un dos, right?
Yeah.
And people were like, that's funny.
He said dos.
He said two.
And he did the visual with the dos.
I recognize that.
Yeah.
So, but I think a little bit it kind of said, the hypothesis was right. And then I told but it was like a full bit that I did. Well, not a full bit. It was a good piece of the bit that I did. And it wasn't.
It was 5 minutes of your gym stuff instead of the full 10.
It was maybe like 2.5 minutes.
They were like, that was only uno joke. No mas. No mas worked for you.
But the audience started to laugh at the ridiculousness of me continuing the next 2 minutes in the Spanish and committing to it. But I learned that in improv, I learned that in sketch, and I learned that in stand-up. If you don't commit to a bit, you might as well not do it. So, I'll coach my students in stand-up, in particular for an act out. If you do it, like to me...
Oh, that's good to teach because that doesn't get... I think that's a lot of comics, including mine, and improv guys have pointed this out to me over the years, which is that we don't know what we're doing. Like we're just up on stage talking and telling jokes instead of blocking the scene. Instead of when just simple things like if I'm telling a joke and I'm here or down here instead of directing it to the crowd, or if I'm doing two people in the thing, I have to look this way when I'm talking and look this way when they're talking,
or you can, there's multiple ways to signify it. It could be how you look. That's the easiest way. But you can also make sure that the voice or there's something physical that you're doing that's different.
Another simple improv tool that somebody taught me that I use is tip of your tongue to the roof of your mouth behind your teeth. And he was like, that will keep your head up at all times. It forces you up if you have your tongue up to here, it makes your head stand up straight. And then if you feel your pinky toe, like as you walk and when you're walking, those things naturally make your hand, your body, your posture go up in your head. And then the other thing of if you raise your hands up above here, it does that too, where it makes you bigger and forces you up. And maybe these were things he was giving me because my tendency has always been to
get small,
to be here small. Which is interesting because I just watched a TikTok on something else, like something about like going into a room and four cornering it and being like the star of the room, and like somehow that projection works just in daily life. And the way she was describing, there's a story about Marilyn Monroe walking around New York with one of her friends, and she's just a person walking around. Nobody's noticing it's Marilyn Monroe. Nobody's bothering her, and it's just a whole thing. And then she says to her friend, "Hey, you want me to turn it on?" And he didn't know what she meant, and he was like, "Sure," And she just something about in her internal state changed her mindset, and now cars are slowing down, people are coming over to them, and so it was sort of that, and then this lady was describing
the subway vent thing.
The subway went by and her dress. Maybe that's what happened. She's like, "You want me to turn it on?" Now everybody notices, of course. she unbuttoned her blouse. Okay, that changes things. But no, but the idea was they explained it like that. And it occurred to me that I do a lot of performance, even if it's it's coming out of me, it's still within this circle of my mind and my little space. And so,
body language, and how you carry yourself.
They're watching this performance within this space. And then I genuinely went on stage the next time and thought of the corners of the room and just be this whole space. And it changed.
Yeah.
It went from a good show to people stopping me for a couple days afterwards, wanting to talk to me. But I don't know if it was that, but it was a couple shows that worked, but it instantly, when I saw her saying that, I know what she meant. That happens so rarely for you, where you have that that thing that's finally the way to get it.
Tom did the subway dress thing on stage.
But the description of it's just so clear to me, me here, even if I'm yelling the joke or having the energy, it's still right there. I'm hoping the more as I do comedy more and more now, like I'll
reach the corners.
I'll reach to that more,
Yeah.
you know?
I think improv kind of puts that I mean, that if you go through improv and perform improv enough to be successful, you have to do that. You have to provide that energy and make the audience catch up to you. Whereas I don't know how many stand-ups I've ever heard blame the audience. And, I hate that.
Right.
And not that I'm not saying I'm always successful, but
There's always something
There's always something you could do. That's how I feel.
something better.
I always blame myself. Like there's something I could have done to connect because the next guy did, or I did for that 3 minutes during the set, you know what I mean, or whatever. Like even when you bomb, there's a time that you can figure it out and make it snap into being.
Did you ever hear of Jenny's first time doing stand-up?
I like this story.
It's right along this, because we started the club just as improv, and then when it was stand-up, I was like, "You should do it." She's like, "Nah, you should do it." Nah. She was thinking about it, but she was still like, "Nah." And she was hosting and kind of running an open mic. I was traveling or something like that, and every time the comics would get down and blame the audience for lack of laughing.
Right.
And so she's like, all right. So she goes up for the very first time and she kills. And I've heard this, she didn't tell me this. This is the other people in the room.
Right.
And she's like, yeah, probably was the audience.
Yeah.
A little
little dig.
Yeah, but I think that sort of example in a scene means a lot. Right, because then you can't blame the audience when, like, if the whole show goes that way, it's easy to be like, yeah, that's right. That was probably what it was. But when somebody goes up there and shows you how to
break that
energy and to bring the audience up to your energy, I mean, you can't then say blame somebody else. Then you have to actually get better. Right, I taught the mayor in a class, and
trying to get the mayor on here.
Oh yeah,
yeah. That's a good idea for the mayor to take like speech and comedy and.
Oh, she had that idea. She was good. Like she had a lot of the stuff down. The thing, but stand up, is a learned skill. It's not, so she could be fun and funny, and she had the public speaking part down. She had a lot of storytelling down, but after the class, I was like, and you see the service we do here, because it's a whole bunch of broken people that we keep contained, and
yes,
and without us,
we ought to get a grant from the mental health department.
You would have Batman level villains unleashed upon the scene.
It's really Arkham funny, Comedy Club, yeah.
But it's done in such a great way that
Arkham It's funny, dude.
I do like that.
Yes.
That would also be appropriate. Yeah. Apropos, but it kind of just goes to show that the community here supports everybody with their flaws. And
I'm surprised the mayor doesn't hit you up to help you find like get my speechwriters in there, like to figure out because some of that stuff, that policy or my point of view versus my opponent's point of view, like a joke will get that across with impact that lasts. Mm-hmm. And you can also dismiss their side with the perfect joke, and not only that, truth is hilarious.
Yeah,
if you say it crisply, right?
Yeah,
so it's like Hedberg again, like this shirt is dry clean only, which means it's dirty. Like that's okay. We know that's the truth. Like those kind of lines. I'm surprised she doesn't try to take advantage of that.
Yeah, it's. I've been hit up for people that do public speaking to punch up their talks, but never a politician.
I'm surprised that if I was a politician, I would make sure my speechwriters went and learned comedy writing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I would borrow, like, how you said Eric makes you feel small. I think he could do that.
Yes. Right.
He would be on my team.
Yeah. I'd want me on my team too. I'm pretty snarky too.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah. I can think of ways to say things.
Yeah, and then you do need to probably in politics de-snarkify it so that it has the impact and it doesn't get dismissed.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what a laugh is.
You
know what I
s-
mean? It's like
it is.
people disagree with your opinion, and then they laugh at your opinion. Like they laugh at your mocking their thing. And I think that ends up in my mind, it's like a seed planted that sort of starts to change their mind, you know?
A connection, yeah. Because if you can see some of the ridiculousness or just see the other side in light and not have somebody throw something and just screaming at you that you're wrong.
That language thing you were talking about, I want to go back to. There was a guy named Leonard Sherring when I was coming up, and this was the only bit I can remember him doing. I think he drives truck. He was sort of an out there, sort of Andy Kaufman-ish type character, and he would do. That was when mid to late '90s, early 2000s. He would do a French version of Andrew Dice Clay. And he would do it in French. Yeah, I'm hanging. You know, I can't do French, but he would do the mannerisms and the thing. And it was a 5-minute bit, and it would kill.
Yeah.
It would kill. It got him festivals. It got him things because it had that what you're talking about. It's just the mechanism of how the brain works and knowing the tones and the beats of what that's funny, you know.
Yeah, and that's actually the way you describe that. And embarrassingly, I learned it. I had learned this from improv before I ever did stand up and took the mic. I don't know the exact count, but it was like 2,500 shows of improv comedy before I ever did stand up.
Really?
Yeah. And so
had you always wanted to do stand up, or did you?
Yeah, because I didn't know what improv was until I started doing improv.
And then you started doing improv and you fell in love with it, and you're like, I don't need that stand up thing.
Well, it wasn't that I didn't need it. It was just that I still didn't have a convenient outlet.
Okay.
Yeah, so it took starting our own comedy club to create.
You'd be surprised how many comedy clubs are started by people that couldn't get work as a comic, and they're like, you know what, I'm gonna start a club and I'll get all the stage time I want. You know
we just started with the open mics, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna love it. And my favorite form of comedy
really cool.
is always the one that I'm doing currently, right? So did sketch at San Francisco Sketch Fest, and that was my favorite. Did stand up and improv and sketch in a show last weekend, and whatever I was doing at the moment was my favorite.
Is it hard to be around, go to work and be around scientists and be like, you motherfucker, nobody's funny around here.
No,
you guys are the worst control group ever. Maybe
because they love him because he's the funniest.
Yeah.
Well, I actually think that there is a Bob Uecker effect that can help teams be better teams. Right, so I'm aging myself, and
I was about to Google who that.
You don't know who Bob Uecker is?
Wait, yes, I do. He was yes. Okay.
Yeah, I got
Now
the
that
front row. I
his
guess
face.
that is really old. I got the front row. And
I mean,
just a bit outside.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
We used to call it Bob. I used to call it Bob. Did you talk to Bob Uecker? And it was like if you'd been out drinking that night before and you were throwing up, we called that Euchen.
Yeah.
You talked to Bob Uecker tonight? Uecker. Yeah. Okay.
So and I actually credit the success I've had in my professional life a lot to improv and stand up. Not only from when I present, I can help read the crowd and play those same tones in the same way, have that dialogue with the audience, just like it was a show.
It has to help with getting across big scientific ideas. It
does.
has to help to be able to do that in a human way.
What was amazing to me is that I'd never thought of like that those performances should be a character. I was like, well, of course it should be I should be in the persona of I got something to say. And it comes across much better with the energy of this is an engaging talk versus let me just tell you some facts.
Do you think if we brought you on and filmed enough hours of us talking science comedically, right, that you could be like a Bill Nye type guy, like a way that the average American relates to, not Bill Nye, but you know what I mean? Like the average American can relate to the science. Brain science needs that. It needs somebody that makes this fucking undefinable thing touchable to real people. And it's not going to work at a comedy club, but it will, but not. The audience is here online, and like I'm excited by this idea.
We'll talk, because I got a like a form, a structure. I think that would work. And
Like
and you would
Beekman's
be
World?
an excellent participant in it.
You're going to be a regular guest as much as you'll come back. I want to talk about, because I'm fascinated by the brain and brain science and mapping the
Yeah,
brain.
we're gonna-
I'm reading about near-death experiences right now, and I've had a ton of near-death experiences on stage where all my jokes aren't working, right? and you were talking about seizures and stuff, and that's the closest thing people do have near-death experiences on them, but it's a dreadful feeling for somebody that's in a near-death experience, and they know it's a different feeling than the real near-death experiences, which are joy-filled and there's no fear in them, and there's, they're real moments,
Yeah.
So anyway, it's interesting. That's the difference. Like that, we were talking about mind and brain, like. They figured out ways, as you know, to stimulate parts of the brain to make like your hand move or to make you laugh or to make you something itch or whatever. But unlike a near-death experience, when those are happening, they know it's not them. Like they're like, why'd you move? You moved my hand. Like they know you did that. So it didn't come from their mind to move their hand, and they realize that, which helps sort of in the what they're trying to figure out if the difference between mind and brain, which I'd never even considered that was even a thing before. So this is new to me too, to be like, oh, they're right, it is a different thing.
Yeah, there was a fair amount of drinking that we would do in grad school and in our drunken states, because there wasn't so much. It sounds like it should be a weed conversation, but we didn't have that there.
Yeah,
so
we'll get some here. We'll go ahead and have it here.
But it is this kind of like there's definitely a difference, and lots of certainly animals have nervous systems, ganglia, brains, but the mind seems to be pretty unique to humans. And what is it specific about our brain that enables that, and why is it turned on for all of us?
Right. And does the brain create the mind, or is the mind there and it goes through the brain? Like which they don't know yet, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's really not going to be a way to like test that scientifically. Yeah. I don't, at least not for a long, long time in the kind of paradigms that we live in now.
Yeah.
So it's going to be one of those things that's thought about and written about, and it's going to be more thought experiment than it is going to be able to test and say, this is how the brain, how the mind emerges from the brain, or vice versa.
Comedy-wise, I feel like I can think of, like, I sit down and try to write a joke and I'm using my brain and phrase it. And other times it's like, I don't know, it just feels like I laugh at it because my brain heard it at the same time as I did. What I mean? Like that makes if that even makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's part of the creative process, though, and from doing it so much. I mean, I don't know if you've ever calculated the amount of jokes that you've probably written over your lifetime.
Right.
But you're talking about a huge mass of effort that now you have reflexes.
It's weird that they're in there. I recognize that in conversation, like a thing that I thought 10 years ago that I haven't thought.
And it comes out.
It's not there ever, and then bam, it's fucking there. You know, like. Anyway, I just read this book, this Mozart's Brain and the Fighter Pilot, about the mind and stuff, and how about, like, because I'm sure comedy works the same way. Like, as if the more you're introduced to language at a young age or music at a young age, like the brain builds and connects those neurons, like, and expands that area of the brain and makes it stronger and stronger. Like a muscle, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And if you don't use it for a number of years, it'll start to atrophy, but it's still there. Mm-hmm. And as opposed to someone who just now starts writing jokes or starts thinking funny or doing that at 50, they can still create those, but they're starting from scratch. Whereas we're starting from like these connections that are made that are strengthened by use.
Yeah.
You know?
So, but like at its very basis, though, of what is funny, the fact that that person that's 50 that's now just starting to write jokes in the form of stand-up jokes, that's not necessarily meaning that they haven't had the tools underneath that. Okay. Like they may very well have like Carlin level observations that they've never actually put into the structure.
I think most people are like that. They say jokes and they don't realize they said them, or they don't. they don't write them down and use them again. To me, it's like comedy's just collecting those things that we as individuals, like there's probably a guy in your office that's funny, but he doesn't even realize it, right? He says one funny thing every 3 days, but he doesn't write that thing down. And if he did, after a month, he would have 10 minutes.
Correct. And he would get better at identifying it and making it come out on purpose in that structure.
Yes.
There's so many ideas that happen at work where they're going with like funny, fun ideas. They're just structured more like a funny essay, right? It's more like, I got this weird thing, and then they'll kind of say why it's weird. Comedian takes that same thing and turns that into 8 jokes.
Right.
And so that's the part of teaching stand-up, is to bring that to the element of like, you're going to cue the audience to laugh. You're going to generate the laughs by structuring your thoughts this way, and this way. That's where that wraps back to like, me being analytical. I'm certain Chappelle does his jokes without ever thinking through it in the analytical way that I do, of course. And so I know it's
or
not
he did so much that now it's sort of almost automatic.
Probably not with the same level of analysis, right? Because like I think there's so much trial and error, and like gifted people go through that trial and error real fast, and they do lots of reps, and they get up and do lots of time, and they get better real fast. But I think anybody that starts to kind of put it out there on paper and kind of do the exercises academically can start to build those muscles.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
I did it through doing Gene Pare's comedy workbook. I like stuff like that. I don't know if you've read
I'm familiar with it, but I haven't read it. Yeah.
All right. Well, we got to wrap this up, man. I could talk to you again for another hour.
We'll do it again.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Thanks, man.
Awesome.
Dude, that was fun. That's a wrap, dude.
Yeah, look at you rapping.
That's
You're usually like, all right, see ya.
Well,